Horror Lies.
Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you. I'm your regular Wednesday night host here at BodyBags. It is week 344 and day number of whatever on this quarantine / whatever. Depending on where you live, geographically, really depends on how bad the situation really is. And everything from a volunteer sort of lockdown mode to the real thing. And so all my hopes and prayers go out to each and every single one of you. And hopefully in some small way, BodyBags is helping you just a little bit through this time. And all of the content that is in horrorphilia.com, just tons of content, be it podcasts, videos, whatever. So for week 344, I thought I would take a look at a film that I was really shocked had never been done on BodyBags before, at least not to what I could see. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. This movie came out in 1985. It was directed by Steinmann. The one major film I think he was known for too, really, The Unseen in 1980 and Savage Streets in 84. But really, this is the film that probably had or received the most fan outrage, I think, at least initially. I know for the longest time in my life, I hated this movie with every fiber in my being. I hated it more than Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I think. I hated it more than Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. You know, as a kid growing up, I think Halloween 3 was the first to solely to settle and jive with me, and then Freddy Nightmare 2 actually started to jive with me, and then finally, as of now, I've really started to turn the corner here on how I look at this entry into the Friday the 13th. Now this is my Paramount box set, that Walmart, the compressed box, and I'll say it's the first 8 movies. $19.99. I think you can still get it at Walmart for $19.99. The first 8 films, and they don't compress the discs on one another, which is nice. You can kind of flip them over and pick out your disc, and so the first 8 films, and it's not a bad box set. JP said long time ago via the 22 Shots, or maybe it was his own private YouTube channel, that as a collector, especially beginning and starting out, and even not so, this is a great way to pick up films, and Walmart is constantly putting out these compressed box sets at a very, very, very reasonable price. I just came home with Wrong Turn, all the films in that, and I only paid, I want to say it was $12 and change. And I got a lot of box sets this way, be it Final Destination or whatever the case. I think the nicest box set, compressed, re-release box set that Walmart put out was the 10 films from Halloween. That was very nicely done. The Phantasm, that's out there as well, I think. And but this is a good way of getting your hands on these at a very reasonable price. I think I got Leprechaun up there. I've got a whole bunch of the compressed Puppet Master and all that stuff. So these are things that you can pick up very reasonable at Walmart. So anyways, this film. Now the reason, the catalyst for wanting to do this as a quick review really was the Bay of Blood podcast guys, both Will Cardinal and Glenn up there, and we did a film commentary session via Skype, and man, it was a freaking blast. If you've never been part of recording a film commentary session from a fan perspective, man, I'm telling you, it allows you to watch a movie really almost as you're watching it for the first time brand new, because you're watching it in company, but with somewhat of a, I was going to say skeptical eye. That's probably the wrong word, but you're really watching it because you're going to be exchanging thoughts and opinions throughout, and it does get funny from time to time. But anyways, watching it, revisiting it, as we were talking towards the end of that commentary session, that you know, even up to that point, coming to the close of that session, gee, man, we'll call it a review, whatever. My thoughts on the film really had evolved just in that short a period of time. I mean, they were already starting to evolve, but I mean, as a kid in '85, I'm 15. This literally is like, I think, the only movie I ever walked out of the theater on. I think the minute I really started to sense that this was an imposter, this really wasn't Jason, I walked out and tried my best to get my money back. But now being nearly 50, it's fun to go back and revisit these films that we maybe hated as a kid and look at it with a different eye, be it critical, but still a different eye. And I really enjoyed it, you know, and just looking up at some of the things and talking about this. Of course, Harry Manfredini comes back, of course, and I'll get into the plot in a second. One of the interesting things in there is he scored the film The Horror Show in '89, which is a movie that still hasn't found its way into my collection, but it's a movie I have fond memories of as a kid watching. And House, of course, right? I think those two are, you know, in that set that Screen Factory put out. The cinematographer shot films such as Slumber Party Massacre. This is Stephen Posey, of course. The special effects, man, some of these guys, man, went on to do some really neat things. Whether it's Jaws 3D or The Outing, a bunch of them worked together on The Outing in '87. And Frank Munoz, he actually went on to do Halloween 2, some of the practical effects in that. And Mark Sparks would go on to be a prop maker in both Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 4, which is kind of neat. So, if no other reason, the surprise guest appearance, and not really guest appearance, he's a main character for a bit, is the guy who's in charge of the halfway house, which will be my segue into the plot narrative, I guess. And that is Richard Young, who plays Matt, who's in charge of the halfway house. He's, of course, Fedora in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He's the guy who basically becomes the protege for young Indy to look up to and to model and become. If you remember that, he steals the Cross of Coronado from in the beginning of that movie. So that's an interesting. But this movie does see the return of young Corey Feldman to reprise his role as Tommy Jarvis, but then we have an older Tommy Jarvis played by John Shepard throughout the remainder of the film. And really, what you have here, we're no strangers to this film. It is a weird oddity in the franchise. It is the one that really does not star our main antagonist, Jason Voorhees, although his name is said fully, I think, in the only time in the franchise in this movie. Really what you have is you have a damaged Tommy Jarvis who is being sent to a halfway house to sort of live out there for a few years, I guess. And there's an accident there. This halfway house is a collection point for a lot of baggaged young teenagers who are dealing with a lot of crap. And a couple more goofy than others, but there's a terrible, terrible accident where a young kid gets basically axed up, and unbeknownst to anyone there, the father, who I'll just keep some of this out of the view, just in case by chance you haven't seen it. The father, via the work he does, will end up on the scene where we see his kid having been axed up to death, and he will then, of course, take out his vengeance on anyone and everyone that is anywhere remotely close to this halfway house. And that will trigger along the way a young Tommy who's dealing with a lot of crap, and slowly but surely he's going to begin to fall to the dark side of the force, as they say. And by the end of the movie, of course, we have this interesting thing set up for the narrative to be pushed in a sense of where Tommy will sort of take the mantle from Jason and push it forward. Not so different than we got to see at the end of Halloween 4 and even Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Opportunities to push the narrative slightly different in different directions, or a lot different. But in the end, never enough guts to actually push the narrative forward. So go figure on that one. And so really a lot of, it is a bloody film, one of the bloodiest in the franchise, I think. And but it does seem aimless and reckless, and it really does not seem to be much of any real rhyme or reason to who the killer is killing, and really why, except that he snapped, and that really is just it. He has snapped. And so, unaware of my time, I think I'll just kind of narrow this down in hopes that I'm under my time. But it is an interesting film to go back and review and look at with, you know, critical eye, but at the same time to sort of put a lot of our bias of where we have been most of our life off to the side and give it renewed life, renewed chance, I guess. And so I would challenge you, if it's been a while, to check this out. And I know this movie gets a lot of fanfare within our group here, somewhat very humorously. But it is a movie definitely worth checking out or revisiting. For most of us, it would probably just be revisiting. And again, the catalyst is just doing a film commentary. It was so much fun. And, you know, it's just looking at movies that typically in the past we've hated so much. When you get to be part of something like a film fan commentary session, it does put the film in a different light. I mean, it just becomes more fun, I guess. And it did. It was a blast to record that with the Bay of Blood guys, both Will and Glenn. And I'm hoping there'll be more opportunities to do more of those fan commentary sessions. That will be dropping soon, I hope. And so definitely check out that. I wish I had a link to put up for you now, but I don't. I just can point you in the direction. The Bay of Blood, both not only film commentaries, but podcasts as well. But this is BodyBags, right? And as we continue forth through this weird time that we live in, I just, again, all my hopes and all my prayers go out to you. If you're wondering, my family is doing well at the moment, as well can be, right? But the virus has not touched us, thankfully. And my hopes and prayers is that it will not touch you either. And if it has, pray that you will heal up and get back to your normal routine soon. But here we are at week 344 with the fifth installment into the the Friday the 13th franchise, the film that comes out in 1985. Continue to travel along with BodyBags as we continue along these weeks as they unfold. And as always, I end these things off with Go Bills.